Welcome back. You're watching World Talks, and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. Poland's main opposition Law and Justice Party's prime ministerial candidate, Przemysław Czarnek, stirred controversy on Monday when he stated Kyiv should stop receiving Western aid until it addresses a long-standing historical grievance. This led to the leader of the party, Jarosław Kaczyński, admonishing him, saying that military aid for Ukraine is necessary. Visible cracks in Poland's leading opposition party are starting to appear. And so today, with my guest, Aleks Szczerbiak, professor of political science at the University of Sussex, we're going to shed some light on these very cracks and try to put them in context. Professor, long time no see. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with you again.
Thank you. So why did Jarosław Kaczyński publicly distance himself? Because I think it's safe to say for us that he distanced himself from Przemysław Czarnek's position on Ukraine. How do you read into this whole debacle? Is it a significant development for domestic but also international politics?
Yes, I think that he admonished Mr. Czarnek because Mr. Czarnek went a bit too far. Law and Justice has shifted its approach to the Ukrainian issue because it believes that Polish public opinion has moved on this issue, and in particular, opinion on the right side of the political spectrum. So people who might vote for Law and Justice, but also vote for one of the two confederations. So Law and Justice now believes that Poles, while still very supportive of Ukraine, in their war against Russia and still seeing that as a top priority, providing them with support for that, feels that Poland needs to be much more transactional. It needs to assert its interests much more in those areas where Poland and Ukraine have different interests. So, for example, over historical issues or economic issues, such as access of Ukrainian goods, agricultural goods, to the Polish and EU markets. And in that sense, Law and Justice has gauged where public opinion is and become much more assertive and much more instrumental. The problem for Mr. Czarnek is he's crossed the line. He's gone a bit too far. And the problem that he's raised is that he's raised the issue of actually stopping military aid to Ukraine. And this is too far as public opinion is concerned. Most Poles, although they do believe that Poland needs to be more assertive and more transactional in its approach with Ukraine, still see that on that big question in terms of, what is the biggest military strategic security threat to Poland, it is still Russia. And on that question, Poland still needs to continue to provide military, humanitarian and diplomatic aid. And I think that is the problem. Mr. Czarnek crossed that line. But let's not over-egg this. Mr. Kaczyński didn't really reprimand him very much. It was a very symbolic token reprimand and very much in contrast to the position that he's taken on how Mateusz Morawiecki, who's from the other wing of Law and Justice, has behaved, and he's come down much harder on him. So, yes, he has reprimanded him, but it's very much a token reprimand, I think.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that after what Mr. Czarnek said, he's going to be replaced as the ministerial candidate of the Law and Justice Party?
Not immediately, because I think if he was, then Mr. Kaczyński would be basically admitting that he'd made a mistake, and I don't think he wants to do that just yet. I think also he's probably inclined to give him another chance, but I think that Mr. Czarnek's position is quite weak now. I mean, notwithstanding this. Going a bit too far in terms of toughening the party's stance on Ukraine. And it's not the first time that Mr. Czarnek has misspoken and gone a bit too far and got the party into trouble. He's simply not delivering in terms of what he was supposed to do when he was made the prime ministerial candidate. He was supposed to stop the leak of support to the two confederations, to the parties to the right of Law and Justice, and win some of those voters back. The leak has stopped to some degree, but he's not really winning those voters back. And I think he is coming across through, for example, his recent comments on Ukraine as something of a liability. But I think for the moment, he's not going to be replaced because Mr. Kaczyński doesn't want to admit a mistake. But that doesn't mean that he won't be replaced before the next parliamentary election, October 2027, and I think that has now become much more likely.
I'm very happy that you mentioned leaking of the support for the Law and Justice Party for the two confederations, because I would like to take a look at the numbers. If we play the numbers, support for right-wing and far-right parties in Poland, the surveys show that there's 23% support for the Law and Justice Party, compared to 30% when Mr. Czarnek was announced to be the next ministerial candidate for the Law and Justice Party. We have the Confederation, we have Brown's Confederation of the Polish Crown, who score higher now combined than the Law and Justice Party. Do you trust these numbers? And is it really the case that Mr. Czarnek has pushed it over the edge to a point where now Law and Justice is having significant problems when it comes to public support because of his statement?
I don't think the situation is quite that grim for Law and Justice yet. I think that when Mr. Czarnek became the prime ministerial candidate, there was a little bit, there was some kind of hollowing out in terms of Law and Justice's drop in support. But I suspect this was more to do with the fact that in April, the different factions within the party united and have on recent issues presented a much more united front. For example, during the hospital scandal, which has dominated Polish politics for the last month or so, voters didn't notice these divisions within Law and Justice so much. So it's not as grim as you paint it. And the poll that puts the combined vote for the confederations against Law and Justice, I mean, this is one poll at the moment. I mean, obviously, it's a very worrying poll for Law and Justice, but we're not clear that that's a trend. What's undoubtedly happening is Law and Justice is not winning back those voters that have defected to or are going to the Confederation and to Mr. Brown's Confederation of the Polish Crown, and that's explicitly the reason why Mr. Czarnecki was made the prime ministerial candidate. It was to stop that leakage of votes and to win some of those voters back. And although it's not a dire situation for Law and Justice, they are still clearly the largest party on the right. They've getting about 25% or so support in most polls. The reason that he was made the prime ministerial candidate, he is not fulfilling. He's not fulfilling his brief, which is why I think he could be in trouble. And it's a long way to go, but he could well be replaced before autumn 2027.
Do you think that Jarosław Kaczyński, who's the leader of the Law and Justice Party, is still able to control the political direction and messaging that the Law and Justice is trying to pass on to its voters? Or perhaps the statement is showing that Mr. Kaczyński's influence is somewhat melting away within their own ranks?
Yes, that's a very good question. So he can control things to some extent, but not to the extent that he used to be able to. I mean, if Mr. Kaczyński wasn't there, and he's not going to be there forever, I mean, he's getting older, and his political retirement will come in the not too distant future. The internal frictions within Law and Justice and on the Polish right more generally would be much more severe. I mean, I think it is keeping things on the road to a degree that it wouldn't be if Mr. Kaczyński wasn't there, because there is no comparable figure on the Polish right or indeed within Law and Justice that can still exercise some degree of authority across the party and within those factions. But that degree of authority is waning. At one time, Law and Justice was hegemonic on the Polish right. The emergence of these two challengers on the Polish right getting substantial support is the first bit of evidence that Mr. Kaczyński's authority has been waning on the right more generally. The fact that the factional groups within Law and Justice, and particularly Mr. Morawiecki, are operating very openly, are not intimidated by threats from Mr. Kaczyński as they were at one time, shows that authority is waning. It is not what it was, and it is gradually going to wane over time as we move towards that point where it's clear Mr. Kaczyński is going to stand down as leader, and then it will be much more difficult to hold that formation together. He can still, for the moment, he does still have some authority, but it's not what it was, and it is waning.
Considering that there is a lot of tensions over historical grievances between Warsaw and Kyiv those past few weeks, what do you think will carry more weight in Kyiv? Czarnek's statement, or perhaps the support, limited but still support, by Jarosław Kaczyński? And how do you think this is going to play into the dynamic which is currently unraveling?
So I think that what Mr. Kaczyński said is much closer to where the centre of gravity is, both within Law and Justice and also on the Polish right and in public opinion more generally. I think that Mr. Czarnecki overstepped, basically. He went too far. Poles and even Poles on the right don't want to stop military aid to Ukraine. So I think that Mr. Czarnecki's position will be interpreted as an outlier, not particularly helpful in Ukraine, because obviously any major politician questions providing continued military support to Ukraine, even as a kind of a misstep, even taking him outside the consensus within his own grouping. It's a problem. It's not good for Ukraine. In terms of how things develop in the future, I mean, a lot of this, I think the ball is probably in Ukraine's court now, because I don't think that the hardline position that Law and Justice is taking is very much reflexive, as I said at the beginning, of where Polish public opinion is. It wants its leaders to take a very tough line on these historical issues and indeed on other issues. Karol Nawrocki, the Law and Justice supportive Polish president, when he took a very tough line on this, saw his support increase. Okay, so I don't think there's going to be any retreat on these historical issues and indeed on other issues where Poland feels it needs to assert its interests from Law and Justice. And I think that Poland now feels that the ball is in Mr. Zelensky's court, it's in Ukraine's court, and they've now got to make some succession. So I think that Law and Justice, notwithstanding the kerfuffle, the mix-up about Mr. Czarnecki's words which went too far, is very committed to taking this harder line. It thinks it is in its electoral interest to do so, but also that's what the party believes. It does believe that Poland needs to take a tough line on these historical issues, and it does believe that Ukraine is making a serious mistake by not accepting the Ukraine's role in what most Poles consider to be the genocide of Poles by Ukrainian nationalists during the Second World War.
And we will have to put a full stop there because our time has come to an end. But Professor, thank you so much. Pleasure as always to have you on the program. Aleks Szczerbiak, Professor of Political Science from the University of Sussex, was my guest. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for inviting me. The pleasure is always mine.
And so this would be all for now here on World Talks. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Thank you for joining, but don't go anywhere because we have more news and features coming up next.